In this lesson, we'll understand the principle of secondary action, what it is and what it is not. The scene is secondary action start. If I were to go ahead and hit play, what we have is just a thinking character walking towards us. And we're going to add a little bit of secondary action to this, not only to understand more clear what secondary action is, but to add a bit more personality to this character. And that's something that secondary action is great for, adding more personality and really bringing our animations that much more to life. So first, let's go ahead and understand what it is. Long story short, it's what follows a primary action. It's not to be confused at all with follow-through and overlapping action, which it is a lot of times. Secondary action, and an example of this would be a character shaking his fist if he were upset, walking towards another. Or perhaps a character pointing as he's running in a certain direction. That is what secondary action is. It can even be as slight as an eye shift. Okay, as the character maybe is focusing on one point while moving in a certain direction, and then something catches his attention and he changes the direction of his eyes to focus on the distraction. So that's what secondary action is, and when using it, again, you can really create some very fascinating and appealing effects to what you have going on in your animations if it's done correctly. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and add some secondary action to this character to again add more personality to the walk. What we're basically going to do is go to about a point where we'd like to have his head tilt, almost as if he kind of had a light bulb go off in his head and he's really trying to reflect on a certain topic, and then we'll have him go back to his original head orientation. Okay, so he thought about something for a little bit and then he goes back to his original thought. So to get started, we will show our control curves, going to show NURBS curves. And we're actually going to utilize my very robust animation layer system. I really love animation layers in Maya. They've really created something solid. So at the channel box, what we want to do is go to our anim section here. Notice we're under display, or should be under display, but we want to switch over to anim. Okay, and notice we have no layers just yet. We're going to marquee select not only the head but also the eyebrow controls. Let's grab all of those. Okay, going to be animating those as well. And with all of these selected, we'll go now to create a new animation layer from selected objects. Okay, so to stay organized, I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer. I'll call this head underscore face underscore offset. Keep it simple. Okay, great. So now that this is done, we can basically set a few keys where we'd like to establish where we don't want any head turn to where we would like the character's head to turn. So let's say, and just hitting play to get a feel for this, let's say about right at this time, this is where he would turn his head. Okay, so I'd say at about frame 48, okay, we'll set a 0 key, okay, for our animation layer. So this is where no movement will occur, and we'd like to have him turn his head around this time. So I'd say about 57, we'll go ahead and set a full weight of 1, okay, where he will fully turn his head. And then we could go to about a point where we'd like to have his head go back to the original orientation. So let's say on about frame 89, we'll have him hold at that head turn until then. So we'll go ahead and set a full weight of 1. And then so we have this nice smooth pose, or nice smooth transition going from the head turn to the original head pose. We'll add several frames here, go into frame 102 and set a 0 key. Alright, great. So now that that's done, let's say we start animating. So on frame 48, with all of these controls still selected, we'll press Shift W and Shift E. Okay, so we can key in translate and rotate keys. Now, from here, auto key will take into effect. We could go to frame 57, go to our rotate tool, just to kind of rotate his head to our left. The character's right, kind of make it look like he's, again, thinking about something deeply. We could even move his head control slightly to make sure that it doesn't look like his head is snapping off his neck. And here's what we end up with. Okay, a nice little head shift. What we'll also want to do here is go ahead and create an interesting expression to show that, or to reflect, this head shift. So on frame 57, let's say we go ahead and with the right eye, kind of squint that, and then the left eye will open. Okay. And then from here we could go ahead and bring up the brows, go to this main brow control and bring that up. What we're basically doing here is just changing direction with the eyes to create an interesting look. So as you notice, if we were to go to, say, frame 48, okay, I'll go ahead and should have set a key on that, but it's okay. We'll go back to that. I'll go to frame 48 and set keys on our custom attributes. Shift E and Shift W wouldn't work in this case since they are custom attributes, so I'll just go to frame 48, key selected. Alright, so now if we were to go to 57 and squint the eyes, the right eyes, and then open up the left eye all the way there. Now, if you look, what we're doing is changing directions to create an interesting shape, just going from one extreme to the other, so to speak. And those type of procedures, okay, if we do things like that, going from one extreme to the next, really create life and energy into what we're animating. Alright, so just going to go ahead and add some slight offsets here, bringing down the right brow now, that forward. Okay, great. So that's looking pretty good already. Wonderful. Why is animation so fun, huh? Maybe because there's so much life in it, and you can really create some interesting characters with it that are basically memorable for a lifetime. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and tweak out a few more of these. Not going to spend too much time on this. Kind of get the idea here. And all we need is really this one pose. We've already set our on and off switch. So once we have this one pose in place, it'll turn off when it needs to. Alright, so we got this really interesting expression going on. So the character looks the opposite direction and is thinking, and then it goes back to the original position. What I'd also like to do is just go to frame 89 and kind of fix his head a bit here so he's not off balance. Looked like his head was about to fall off there for a second. Okay, great. So here's what we end up with if I were to hide the controls. We've got some really interesting secondary action going on. Wonderful. So again, that's the concept of secondary action. Now, some important things you want to keep in mind about this is you want to make sure it's done at the right time so you do not lose what you're intending to come across with your secondary action. So what you basically want to do is just make sure you have enough time before and after to add your secondary action to your animation so it is not lost and the effect nullified.